They come at the end of geological sentences.
Yes, I already made that joke before. I don't care, it still hits. Earth's Phanerozoic eon is divided into 12 periods. How are they named, defined, separated? Why 12 and not 13? Well, in America, we actually do have 13, but it's 12 everywhere else. Oh, that just raises more questions? Well, buckle up. Now, life has been around for billions of years, just a bit after Earth formed. Of course, for most of that time, it was single cellular, and then Earth was a snowball. The beginnings of the fossil record came in the Ediacaran, but even then was barely anything. When life became fully visible, it was the beginning of a new eon, hence the name. The border between Ediacaran and Cambrian is thusly emblematic of the border between the Phanerozoic and Proterozoic. I mean, it's the same border. More specifically, the shift from simple life to complex life, with a difference in ages being marked by the presence of one specific kind of burrow. This is also emblematic of the shifts, I guess. Chemically, the barrier between the Cryogenian and Ediacaran is marked by iron levels changing and in general more oxygen in the ocean. The barrier between Ediacaran and Cambrian is instead indicative of calcite, which is produced by complex animals. That makes sense for a couple of reasons. Earth's volatile geochemistry settling down allows animals to become complex, and more complex animals can have a stabilizing effect on the environment. In general, Phanerozoic periods are defined more by biology than geology. But enough about the Phanerozoic in general. The Cambrian was first identified by looking at rocks in Wales, hence the name, which is Latin because that's apparently more sciencey. It took up all this space, which is a problem because the Silurian was here, although the Silurian does have a giant divide right here, so blah blah blah. People kept arguing until they invented the Ordovician. Organisms of the Cambrian are largely experimental with massive diversity, it being an explosion and all. The Burgess Shale and Chungcheong biota reveal primitive nephrozoans, an environment dominated by various long, thin creatures with varying amounts of sticky outy bits. Voted by you, the poster child for the Cambrian was Anomalocaris, a large primitive arthropod, sometimes called Lobopodian, though the terminology surrounding that word is confusing. Anomalocaris was a pelagic organism, contrasting the benthic creatures of the time. It was a terrifying apex predator and forever associated with Bring Me to Life by Evanescence. Now, for all its talk of explosive diversity, most of the dominant organisms of the Cambrian were a fan of variations on the simple bilaterian bow plan, with a long body, head, and tail. Not technically a tail, but whatever. Hard times would isolate this diversity into the most successful strains. As you can't see because this map is a mollywide and we're interested in the South Pole, all of Africa has come crashing together into South America to form Gondwana, resulting in the famous Amazonian mountains that don't exist anymore because of 500 million years of erosion. More importantly, it results in a ton of lava hitting the surface and carbon release and climate change and ocean acidification. And so, after looking at enough rocks in Wales, they decided to name a new period. Of course, because the Cambrian was already named after Wales, they named it after the Ordovicans, an ancient Celtic tribe that lived in Wales. Voted by you, the most organism of the time period was the renowned Isotellus. Now, I'm going to assume Isotellus was meant to represent the entire trilobite clade, and I will ignore that having two nautiloids might have split the vote. Whatever, in the Ordovician, there's no room for imperfection, no more gradients, nothing in between. Each group has their own unique bow plan. I believe this is called character displacement. The trilobites are by far the winning group, with a heavily armored, bottom-feeding, shallow water design, and many theories say they were the first to invent complex eyes, and certainly the best at it. The apex predator was Endoceras, the giant in a horn, an enormous squid with a 20-foot-long shell, and ambush predator. In many ways, the Ordovician was the age of shells, with armored fish, armored squid, armored sea scorpions, armored trilobites. Wow, sure sounds like ocean acidification would just kind of kill everything. Fortunately, that's not what happened. Instead, it's new. The climate cooling is nothing new, and it's nothing they can't adapt to, but what is new is Gondwana moving over the South Pole. Snow falling there never melts, locking away water under massive ice sheets, which makes temperature and sea level drop even harder, and things keep spiraling until some volcanoes correct things, which, of course, we rise into a new era, still named after Wales, but after a different Celtic tribe this time. Oxygen is on the rise, so much so that an ozone layer is even on the rise. So now the land is protected from harsh UV rays just like the ocean is. You picking up what I'm putting down? The land is safe, and there's lots of oxygen in the atmosphere. So the plants made it onto land, and maybe a millipede or two, but the main party is still in the ocean. You voted the Silurian poster child as Eurypterus, a sea scorpion. Champions of the shallow water environment, the realm of newly formed reefs that they share with trilobites and the rapidly diversifying fish. Not a lot really happened in the Silurian, mostly recovery from the extinction, but as it comes to a close and Laurussia smashes together, forming part of the Appalachian Mountains, the Clonk event releases more carbon into the atmosphere, leaving it rich for anyone who wants to claim it, and claim it they did. As we learned from rocks taken not from Wales, but from Devon, about 15 miles south of Wales, fish diversify even harder, so much so that everyone else has to run away onto land, and then the fish also try to make it onto land. You voted Tiktaalik as the poster child for the Devonian, a shallow water fish often associated with the tetrapod's first reach onto land. Now, Ichthyostega is probably better to represent that, but whatever, I get the idea you're trying to convey. The ocean is quite famous because it's the first time one of us vertebrates gets to be the apex predator, the imposing Dunkleosteus. Fish dominate the environment of their age, squishing the sea scorpions to the shores and the trilobites down into the muck. Land is a more fair battleground. Plants are springing up into gigantic forests, new ecosystems of their own. Freshwater fish, sea scorpions, and horseshoe crabs dip in and out of rivers and lakes. Spiders, insects, and amphibians crawl across the land. To top it off, something happened, and now the ocean is running out of dissolved gases and is suddenly a bad place to live. We close out the age of fishes with another mass extinction, shifting the split focus sharply onto land. So now everything is in place for the wild terrestrial adventures of Earth. Woo! Forests are so productive, the fungi can't even keep up, and worms and snails aren't on land yet, so it just gets buried, leaving carbon sequestered and oxygen high. So now there's a ton of coal that bears all the carbon, hence the name. Wait, you point out, that's not the name. And so it isn't. Over across the pond in Wales, probably, there's one big band with limestone and coal. Over here in America, there's one band with limestone and one band with coal. These are most visible in Mississippi and Pennsylvania, as the name suggests. The focus in the Mississippian was mostly in the water, with trilobites and sea scorpions heavily damaged and placoderms extinct. Who else but the crinoids? Woo, we love crinoids! To make a bunch of limestone. The Pennsylvanian is closer to the archetypal Carboniferous with decaying swamps, or rather not decaying swamps, tons of coal, amphibians, and giant bugs. You voted Meganeura, a 2-foot-long dragonfly, as the poster child for the Carboniferous. Personally, I hard disagree and vote Arthropleura, but it's not my choice to make. Also, Siberia hit Laurussia, and we only have 2 continents left. So, that formed these mountains. Well, kind of, because it was moving around and plate tectonics were weird. We'll say it half formed the Ural Mountains, and then all the continents finally came together to fully make them, and also Pangaea. But the Ural Mountains were most important for this time period, hence the name. So, since there's only one continent, there's only one ocean, and much less coastline. So, again, the focus shifts even harder to land. Decreasing oxygen makes giant insects increasingly rare, and the sauropsids, synapsids, and amphibians all vie for control over Earth. The synapsids mostly dominated. You voted Dimetrodon as the poster child for the Permian, which makes sense because it was a dominant organism and also had a unique feature in its sail. Reptiles and amphibians kind of got the short end, unfortunately. Anyway, after its brief time in the limelight, Perm promptly explodes, killing 97% of all life on Earth. All of Siberia actually bookends the Permian and so the Paleozoic, with the biggest repeated volcanic eruption before or since, permanently reshaping biodiversity and fixing our focus on land in the coming era. The Triassic period was discovered in Germany, which was a desert which was then flooded and emerged, leaving behind a 3-layer pattern, hence the name. After a brief period where it was 95% of all life on Earth, the synapsids were to be overshadowed by various amphibians and sauropsids, namely dinosaurs and crocodiles. You voted Coelophysis as the poster child for this era, a slim theropod characteristic of the dinosaurs. It was small, bipedal, and had hollow bones. I feel compelled to point out that no one would care about dinosaurs if we were to only focus on the Triassic. The real apex predators of the day were large land crocodiles, which was all crocodiles. They hadn't gone back to the water yet, like Postosuchus and Saurosuchus. But whatever, I don't divine the votes. Anyway, despite being around for all of 3 periods, Pangea's already breaking up, which makes volcanoes erupt from the divergent boundaries and greenhouse gases for more climate change. Reptiles cemented their dominance, and mammals barely survived. And yes, I mean dominated. On land, we had enormous dinosaurs, and now the crocodiles slunk back into the water, which was already possessed by turtles, plesiosaurs, and ichthyosaurs, and pterosaurs took to the skies. You voted Stegosaurus, a model land dinosaur, as the poster child for the Jurassic. The Jurassic has a name modeled after the Triassic, though it's named after the Jura region of France and Switzerland. And then nothing happened. I mean, the climate cooled down a bit, but nothing specific really happened to end the Jurassic. Then the climate heated back up and the sea levels rose so much they got chalk everywhere, and we decided to name it the Chalky Period. The ramification being life didn't really shift, it just did more of what it was doing. It got bigger. Giant turtles, giant pterosaurs, giant crocodiles, birds, giant plesiosaurs, giant lizards that live in the ocean, giant herbivores, and most famously, giant carnivores. You voted Tyrannosaurus as the poster child for the Cretaceous, a bit of a no-brainer, and plants have flowers now. And then a giant asteroid smacked the Earth. The foremost ramification was, of course, a fine layer of iridium dust encircling the globe, serving as a clear line between eras. But also, the giants of the Cretaceous died off, leaving only the smaller mammals to rebuild. Also, there were volcanoes, so the little guys didn't get off scot-free either. Basically, it was a new era, and we were in the earliest generations, hence the name. The big three to survive this era are birds, mammals, and flowering plants. Birds are warm-blooded, and flowering plants shelter their immature offspring. But mammals do both, so they were the ones to take over. Mostly hoofed mammals and carnivores, the largest ones, are preserved in fossil records and the public imagination, with Paraceratherium, aka Beluchitherium, aka Drakkari, being the poster child for the Paleogene, an enormous hornless rhinoceros. And of course, like any group that came to dominate the land, they sent a group back into the ocean. Birds were here too, but they quickly learned they couldn't really compete with us on the ground. After the ancient generations came the newer generations, hence the name. Now, the flowering plants have divided into monocots and dicots, and beside the forest, we have grasslands warring to populate the earth. Beyond that, everything's slightly cooling, and we're kind of doing the dinosaur thing where we get bigger and don't change a ton, with Elasmotherium, another rhino, being voted as the Neogene's poster child, of course. Now we have primates like Australopithecus and bats and rodents or such, but people only care about the big, charismatic megafauna. Also, the Meg is here. Anyway, like the dinosaurs, something came to kill off the giant mammals. Not the Ice Age. Larger bodies are well adapted, actually. We all just grew wool. Woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, wolves, some of which have been domesticated into dogs. No, what killed off the first poster child, Mammuthus, was the second poster child, us, humans. Anyway, the Quaternary is named because it's the fourth... No, wait, the fourth... Okay, so before people understood geochronology, the Paleozoic was the first, the Mesozoic was the second, the first two Cenozoic was the third, and the Quaternary was the fourth. That looks about even. Well, that was geology. Take care and try not to let the tradition of all dead generations weigh on your brain too hard.